morning po
This meeting
classmates.
is being recorded.
I am Nakilin Bibago, currently working at the Quezon City Government under the City Accounting Department. Today, I will be presenting our report on governance and administrative reforms together with my partner, Ms. Josefina Bartolo Carriaga. So in this discussion, we will explore key reforms that improve governance, focusing on transparency, accountability, and efficiency in public administration. So drawing from my experience in local government, we will highlight how these reforms are implemented and their impact on public service. So introduction to governance. Governance involves decision making, implementation, and accountability across government, civil society, and businesses. So to understand governance, picture it as managing a large organization for the public good with three key aspects. The first is decision making, like designing the 4Ps program to aid low-income families by providing conditional cash assistance. So second is implementation, where agencies like the SWD distribute funds and coordinate with schools and health centers. And third is accountability, ensuring transparency and preventing corruption through monitoring by NGOs and government audits. So the 4Ps program exemplifies this, showing how policies are created, executed, and monitored to effectively serve citizens. So this process highlights the importance of collaboration between various sectors from lawmakers and local communities, ensuring that public service are delivered efficiently and equitably. So by emphasizing transparency and accountability, governance aims to build trust between the government and its citizen, fostering a more inclusive and responsive society. So modern governance has shifted from hierarchical models to participatory approaches, emphasizing collaboration and citizen engagement to address complex social issues. So why has governance shifted? So in recent decades, governance has moved away from hierarchical top-down models and embraced participatory approaches. So this shift comes from recognizing that traditional governance structures, which relies on centralized decision-making, struggle to address complex social issues like poverty, inequality, and environmental sustainability. So the shift towards participatory governance is driven by the shortcomings of hierarchical models, which are plagued by slow decision making, inflexibility, limited citizen engagement, and risk of inefficiency and corruption. So these issues hinder effective governance, especially during crisis, as clearly seen in the slow delivery of aid by the Philippine government after Typhoon Yolanda. So to address the inefficiencies of traditional hierarchical governance, modern governance now emphasizes collaboration, citizen participatory, decentralization, and technology. So these elements make decision making faster, more inclusive, and more responsive to society's needs. So there is a clear distinction between the government and governance as they differ in scope, involvement, approach, focus, role of the state, and evolution. So let's examine these differences in that table below. So by definition, the government refers to the institution responsible for making and enforcing laws and policies. So it operates through formal sectors like the executive, legislative, and judiciary. So while governance is the broader process of directing, controlling, and coordinating societal affairs involving both governmental and non-governmental actors. So under this scope, the government is confined to formal institutions that hold political power and authority. So while the governance extends beyond government institutions, integrating market forces, civil society, and regulatory roles. So the involvement of the government mainly consists of state actors such as elected officials, policy, and public servants. So while the governance involves multiple stakeholders, including businesses, NGOs, international organizations, and the public. So the approach of the government, it is a traditional government follows a top-down centralized decision-making model where policies are made by the leaders and implemented by institutions. So while the approach of the governance, it adopts a more participatory and decentralized approach, encouraging collaboration among different sectors. So the focus of the government, it prioritizes lawmaking, administration, and law enforcement. So their goal is to maintain order and provide essential services. While the focus of the governance, it emphasizes transparency, accountability, efficiency, and stakeholder participation, ensuring inclusive decision making. So the role of the state. So the government primarily acts as the direct provider of services and enforcer of laws and regulations. So while the role of the state under the governance, it shifts the state's role from a provider to facilitator and regulator. So enabling private and civil society sectors to contribute to development. So the evolution of the government. Oh, wait. So traditional and hierarchical in structure with clear division of power, while the governance dynamic and evolving, shaped by the globalization, privatization, and technological advancement, making governance more flexible and inclusive. So in other words, government is an institution. So while governance is a process. So the government operates within a defined structure, whereas governance refers to how different entities interact to manage public affairs. So next is the governance concept. So where did governance come from? So it started way back in the 14th century in France, and the word itself comes from a Greek word kibirinan, which means to steer a ship. So basically, it's about how we steer or guide our society. Simply put, governance is all about making decisions and actually doing what those decisions say. So it's how we run things, both the job itself and how we do it. So how has governance changed? So back in 1972, a guy named Harlan Cleveland said we needed less government, more governance. He meant we should move away from just government telling everyone what to do. Instead, we should have everyone working together. So it's gone from a boss at the top system to a teamwork system. So now we focus on everyone collaborating, agreeing on things, and sharing power. So what does government look like today? So now governance is not just about the government. It includes businesses, regular people, and group like NGOs. So everyone plays a part. So it's also flexible. It changes as our society changes. So it can deal with new problems and needs. And it's not just about government building. So it's about how we all work together to make our economy and society work even outside of traditional government. So the government, like the lawmakers and the judges, now works with all these other groups to make things better for everyone. Public administration is grown and includes more people and processes than before. So in short, governance is how we run our society, and it changed from a top-down system to a team effort involving everyone. So governance concept and international perspective. So governance is a broad concept and various international organizations define it differently based on their focus areas. So understanding these perspectives help us recognize that governance is not just about government. So it's about how power is exercised, decisions are made, and people are engaged in shaping their society. So each organization emphasizes different aspects of governance. So the International Monetary Fund or the IMF focuses on political structures and how power is exercised in managing resources. So imagine the IMF as a global bank that lends money to countries. So before lending, they don't just check a country's bank account. So they also check how the country is being run. So they are concerned with things like what kind of government they have, is it fair and democratic or controlled by a few? So they also look at how the government uses its power and money. So are they using it wisely or is there corruption? So, and finally, they want to know if the government can actually make good decisions and follow through with them. Basically, the IMF wants to make sure their loans will actually help the country get better and not just disappear due to bad management or corruption. So they look at governance as a key factor in making sure their money is used effectively. So next we have Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development or OECD. Highlights the legitimacy, accountability, policy competence, and human rights. So the OECD, which is like a club of countries that want to improve their economies, focuses on four main things when they talk about good governance. Ay, sorry po sa ano. First, they want governments to be seen as legitimate, meaning people trust and accept their authority. Second, they stress accountability, so leaders are responsible for their actions. Third is they emphasize competence, ensuring governments can actually create good policies and deliver services well. So finally, they insist on respect for human rights and the rule of law, protecting everyone's freedom and ensuring fairness. So when these things are in place, like when in the Philippines implemented the Freedom of Information Executive Order to increase transparency, so it builds trust and helps the economy grow. So third, we have the United Nations Development Program or the UNDP. Defines governance as managing national affairs through economic, political, and administrative authority. So the UNDP looks at the governance as something that affects everyone, everywhere, so not just big government decisions. So they say it's about how decisions are made in all parts of society, from national leaders down to our local communities. They emphasize that good governance need four key things. So first is everyone should be able to participate. Second, things should be transparent. Third, everyone should follow the law. And fourth or last, leaders should be held accountable. So for example, so the UNDP supports program where local communities in the Philippines get to plan and decide on projects in their own barangays. Basically, the UNDP wants everyone to be involved in shaping their country's future because good governance happens when everyone, from top to bottom, works together. Fourth is United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or the UNESCO, views governance as a political process involving citizen participation for societal development. So UNESCO sees governance as more than just running things. So they see it as a political process where everyone should be involved in shaping society. So they believe it's about not just vote in elections. So they emphasize the citizens need to actively participate in making decisions to make sure policies are good for everyone. For example, the Sangguniang Kabataan or the SK in the Philippines, it lets young people propose and run community projects, giving them a real voice. Basically, UNESCO wants governance to empower people, encouraging them to be part of the decision-making process so that policy truly reflects what society needs. So public administration is good governance. World Bank 1992 promoted good governance, emphasizing effective public service, independent judiciary, accountability, and transparency. So good governance ensures equity, justice, and responsible administration, preventing corruption and efficiency. So, what it means and why it matters. So, good governance, as emphasized by the World Bank 1992, relies on effective public service, an independent judiciary, accountability and transparency, and equity and justice to ensure a fair and well functioning society. So, effective public service ensures that essential services such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure are accessible to all citizens, while an independent judiciary upholds the rule of law, ensuring justice and accountability. Transparency and accountability prevent corruption and ensure that public officials act in the best interest of the people. Additionally, equity and justice ensure that marginalized groups receive fair opportunities and resources. So, a clear example of this principle in action is the Philippine Commission on Audit, or the COA, which plays a crucial role in promoting accountability and transparency by auditing government expenditures, ensuring that public funds are used properly, and preventing corruption. So by integrating these principles, governance can be more responsive, efficient, and inclusive, ultimately fostering public trust and sustainable development. Government application and new public management. So governance takes various forms depending on the sector it is applied. Three key approaches include minimum state governance, corporate governance, and new public management. So each of which influences how governments, businesses, and public institutions function. So first, we will discuss minimum state governance. So the government plays a regulatory role rather than a direct provider of services. So think about the Philippines water and electricity services. So years ago, the government directly managed these utilities. Now they have shifted towards a minimum state approach. So instead of running everything, they have allowed private companies to handle the day-to-day operations. So the companies like the Manila Water or Meralco are now responsible for providing these services. So the government, through agencies like the Energy Regulatory Commission or the ERC and the Local Water Utilities Administration or LWUA, focuses on setting the rules like pricing and service standards and making sure these companies follow them. So the government's role in regulation and oversight becomes crucial to ensure public welfare is not compromised. So second, we have corporate governance, focuses on business ethics, transparency, and accountability. So corporate governance is like having a set of rules for how companies are run. So it's about making sure that the people in charge, like the CEOs and board of directors, are doing their jobs ethically and responsibly. Think of it as think of it as making sure they are not just looking out for themselves, but also for the people who own the company or the shareholders and everyone else affected by the company or the stakeholders like the employees and the customers. So they want to make sure the company is transparent, meaning everyone knows what's going on, and accountable, meaning they're responsible for their actions. So these rules, like being transparent and accountable, are also being used in the government. So to make sure public officials are also doing their jobs properly. Lastly, we have the new public management, introduce privatization, performance-based management, and market-driven governance. aiming for efficiency but criticized for reducing social equity. Imagine trying to run the government like a business. So that's basically what New Public Management or NPM is about. So it's a way of running government services using business ideas to make them more efficient. So for example, the Quezon City's e-services like online business permit and application or real estate tax payments, it is a good example of new public management principle. So the city government has adopted a business-like approach to improve service delivery and efficiency. For instance, instead of going to City Hall and waiting in long lines, residents can now process many transactions online. So this is similar to how private companies use digital platforms to streamline customer service. So the city is also likely tracking performance metrics like processing times and user satisfaction. So to evaluate the effectiveness of these e-services, reflecting the NPM focus on performance-based evaluation. So next we have governance models and global perspective. So there are two major models. First is the socio-cybernetic governance. Governance results from interactions among various actors rather than a single ruling authority. So socio-cybernetic governance is described by Koyman, emphasizes that governing is a collaborative effort where different groups like the government, businesses, and regular people work together to solve problems. It moves away from traditional idea of government as the sole decision maker. Instead of the government dictating, they recognize the need for dialogue and cooperation with all stakeholders. Government policies therefore don't automatically guarantee results, so they rely on everyone's cooperation. For instance, if the government wants to improve healthcare, they can simply pass a law and expect immediate change. They must collaborate with hospitals, doctors, insurance companies, and even charities to achieve the desired outcome. So their rule shifts from a commanding authority to a coordinator, facilitating an ongoing process of dialogue, agreement, and adaptation. Second is self-organizing network governance. Involves collaboration between government, private sector, and civil society to deliver services efficiently. So network governance is all about networks. It moves away from the old idea of the government being the boss of everything and instead focus on how different groups work together. Think of it as a network, like a spider web, where the government, businesses, and regular people are all connected. So they cooperate horizontally, meaning they are all on the same level. Instead of one being above the others, this often leads to public private partnerships or the PPPs, where the government and private companies work together on projects. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, they use PPPs for things like building roads or running hospitals. So instead of the government doing everything itself, they partner with companies and charities. This way, they can use the expertise and resources of different groups to get things done better and faster. Forms of governance. First is the political. Power is shifting from the national governments to global organizations, businesses, and local governments. Basically, power is being shared more widely. First, there are big international groups like the European Union or the World Bank that can influence what countries do. Then, there are huge global companies that can move money and resources around the world, making them very powerful. And finally, local governments and cities are gaining more independence to make their own rules. This means that national governments are changing their rule. They're not just providing services anymore. So they're also setting rules and helping different groups work together. So, even though they still have some power, they increasingly rely on negotiating, partnering, and using their influence to get things done. second is economic. Governments rely on markets, regulations, and networks to manage economic activities. Historically, governments often directly manage their economies, but now that's changing. They're moving away from being the main players to being more like referees. Instead of directly controlling markets, governments now set the rules and guidelines for how businesses operate. This is because we have seen a rise in things like privatization, where private companies provide services like water or electricity, and deregulation, where the government removes some rules. So, governments are now focusing on making sure there's fair competition and protecting the interest of everyone involved, rather than directly providing services. So, this has often made things more efficient, but it also raises concerns because companies are focused on making a profit, so they might not always prioritize helping everyone equally. So, it's about balancing act between efficiency and fairness. Third is social. Citizens and civil society play a bigger role in decision making through participatory governance. So, governance is not just about governments making decisions by themselves anymore. So, it's becoming more like a team effort where citizens and community groups are actively involved. Coleman and others pointed out that governments can just tell people what to do. They need to work together with them. So this means like co-production, where everyone helps create solutions, and co-regulation, so where everyone helps set the rules. We're also seeing more public-private collaborations where governments team up with businesses and community groups. So you can see this happening in things like this, like community projects, so where people in the neighborhood help plan and build things. So and governments are using things like online surveys and town hall meetings to get feedback from citizens before making important decisions. And now to continue with the remaining topics, I'll pass it on to my partner Joy. So Ma'am Joy, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Ma'am Natalie. Good morning, classmate. Good morning, Dean. I will continue our discussion about good governance and administrative reforms. So now, good governance in the Philippines is guided by principles that ensure transparency, accountability, and efficient public service delivery. So these principles are essential in combating corruption, promoting economic development, and strengthening the democratic institution. So now, good governance refers to the ethical, efficient, and accountable management of government affairs to serve the public interest. According to the United Nations Development Program, it includes the processes and institutions that produce results that meet the needs of society while making the best use of resources. So in the Philippine context, good governance is enriched in the 1987 Constitution, which mandates a government that is transparent, responsible, and participatory. So there are key principles of good governance in the Philippines. Number one is the transparency. So the government decisions, transactions, and policies must be open to the public scrutiny. There are the laws ensuring that transparency. Number one of that is the Freedom of Information, or the FOI, the Executive Order Number 2, series of 2016. It allows the citizens access to government records. Another one law is the Government Procurement Reform Act, or the RA 9184, requires public bidding for government projects. Another key principle is the accountability. So public officials must be held responsible for their actions and decisions. There are agencies that ensure accountability. Number one of that is the Office of the Ombudsman. It investigates and prosecutes corrupt officials. And another one is the Commission on Audit, or the COA. It audits public funds to prevent misuse. Another key is the rule of the law. Governance must be based on a clear and fair legal framework, ensuring justice and equity. So the Philippine initiates, number one is the judicial reform programs to improve court efficiency. And another one is the strengthening of anti-corruption laws, such as the Anti-Graft and Corruption Practices Act, or the RA 3019. The fourth key is the rule of law. And no, the participation and inclusivity. So the citizens must have a voice in decision-making process, and the mechanism for public participation. Number one is of that is the barangay assemblies. It engaged local communities in governance. And another one is the civil society participation in budgeting. So it involves the CSOs in crafting the national budget. Another one is the efficiency and effectiveness. So government institution must deliver services efficiently using limited resources. What are the key reforms? Number one of that is the EAs of Doing Business Act, or the RA 11032. It reduces bureaucratic red tape. And another one is the e-government initiatives like online tax filing and digital ID systems. And then the last key principle is the equity and social justice. So governance must promote fairness and provide equal opportunities for all citizens. What are the programs promoting equity? Number one is the 4Ps, or the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino program. It provides cash assistance to poor families. Another one is the Universal Healthcare Law, or the RA 11223. It expands healthcare access for all Filipinos. Next slide, please. So what are the challenges in achieving good governance? Number one is the corruption and bureaucratic inefficiency. So despite reforms, cases of graft persistent. And another challenge is the weak law enforcement. So some laws lack proper implementation. And another one is the political dynasties and patronage politics. It improving digital governance. It expand online government services to reduce inefficiency. And another one is the increasing citizen engagement. So likewise, good governance in the Philippines is crucial for sustainable development and democracy. While significant progress has been made, continuous reforms and strong public participation are needed to further strengthen accountability, transparency, and public service delivery. Next slide, please. So let's go now for the anti-corruption measures and initiatives. So in the Philippines has implemented several anti-corruption initiatives to promote transparency, accountability, and good governance. It measures against corruption are made by governments and groups to encourage openness, responsibility, and honesty. Here are the key measures includes. Number one is the legislative frameworks. Bribery and other forms of corruptions are against the law, as seen in the Foreign Corruption Practices Act, or the FCPA, and the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, or the UNCAC. Number one of that is the Republic Act number 3019, or the Anti-Graft and Corruption Practices Act. It criminalized corrupt practices among public officials. Another one is the Republic Act number 6713, the Code of Conduct and Ethical Standards for Public Officials and Employees. It mandates transparency, accountability, and ethical behavior in the government. And the last one is the Republic Act number 11032, EAs of Doing Business and Efficient Government Service Delivery Act. It reduces bureaucratic red tape to limit opportunities for corruption. The second measure is the anti-corruption agencies. The Philippines has several government agencies dedicated to preventing, investigating, and prosecuting corruption. These agencies ensure transparency, accountability, and good governance. So like I said earlier, number one of that is the Office of the Ombudsman. It investigates and prosecutes government officials involved in corruption. Another agency is the Commission on Audit, or the COA. It conducts financial audits of government agencies to ensure proper use of public funds. Additional of that is the Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission or the PAAC, investigates complaints against high-ranking government officials. And the last one is the Sandigan Bayan, or the Anti-Graft Court. It is a special court that tries corruption-related cases involving officials. So through investigations, prosecution, audits, and changes to the way the government works, these bodies are very important in the Philippines, in the Philippine fights anti-corruption. Politics getting in the way, case blockades, and compliance gaps are still problems, though. Anti-corruption efforts can be made even stronger by improving communication between agencies and getting more people involved. The third key measure is whistleblower protection and reporting mechanism. So the Philippines has a number of rules and programs that protect the safety and security of people who report corruption. The goal of these steps is to make government and business institutions more open and accountable. So related to this, number one is the Witness Protection Security and Benefit Act, or the RA 6981. It provides protection for individuals who testify against corrupt officials. Another one is the government operates hotlines and online platforms for reporting corruption, such as the 888 Citizens Complaint Hotline. So next slide, please. What are the challenges in whistleblower protection? Number one of that is fear of retaliation. Many whistleblowers face threats, harassment, or even violence. Another challenge is weak enforcement. Some protective measures are not fully implemented due to the lack of resources. Another challenge is the political influence. Cases involving high-ranking officials can be delayed or dismissed. What are the recommendations for strengthening whistleblower protection? Number one of that is passage of a dedicated whistleblower protection law. A stronger legal framework is needed to encourage more individuals to report corruption. Another recommendation is stronger security measures. The government should allocate more resources for witness protection. And then the last recommendation is public awareness campaigns. Encouraging more people to use hotlines and reporting mechanisms can improve corruption detection. And next slide, please. So another key measure is the financial transparency and digital governance. So the Philippines has implemented various financial transparency and digital governance initiatives to improve accountability, reduce corruption, and enhance public service efficiency. These measures focus on over government data, digital transactions, and public access to financial information. Number one of that is the Freedom of Information, or the FOI Executive Order number 2, allows citizens to request access to government documents. Another one is the PhilGEPS, Philippine Government Electronic Procurement System, an online platform for government procurement to prevent bid rigging and fraud. And then the last one is the blockchain-based land registration, is being explored to prevent corruption in property transactions. And then the last key measure is the civil society and international cooperation. Filipinos can fight corruption better with the help of civil society organizations and foreign partnerships that encourage openness, responsibility, and good governance. These steps make it easier for people to get involved, enforce laws against corruption, and make the country more in line with global forms. Number one of that is the Transparency International. So the Philippines and other watchdog organizations advocate for anti-corruption reforms. And another one is the Philippines is a signatory to the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, or the UNCAC, and part of the Open Governance Partnerships, or the OGP. Next slide, please. So now, the administrative reforms in the Philippines. So the Philippines has tried a number of management reforms to make government work better, cut down on corruption, and improve the delivery of public services. The main goal of these changes are to make government institutions more efficient, open, accountable, and up-to-date. So early reforms in the American colonial period, it introduced merit-based civil service and bureaucratic modernization. In post-1987 Constitution, it focused on decentralization, transparency, and accountability. So here are the key administrative reforms initiatives. Number one of that is EAs of Doing Business Act, or the RA 11032, or the Anti-Red Tape Authority, or the ARTA. So it mandates, reduces bureaucratic inefficiencies, and prevent corruption in government transaction. So the key features of this is the streamlined business registration. It established of business one-stop shops, or the BOSS, in local government units. Another one key features is time-bound government services. Agencies must process applications within a specific time frame. And then the last one is the citizen feedback mechanism. It allows the public to report slow or inefficient service. Another one key administrative reform is the civil service reforms, or the CSC initiatives. It mandates, professionalizes, and modernizes the civil service workforce. There are the key programs. Number one is the PBB, or the performance-based bonus. It rewards government employees for efficiency and effectiveness. Another program is the competency-based recruitment. It ensures merit-based hiring and promotions. And another one is the e-governance training. It upskills government employees in digital service delivery. Next key administrative reform initiative is the Government Procurement Reform Act, or the RA 9184. It mandates, ensures transparency and efficiency in public procurement. Here are the key features. Number one is it requires government contracts and bidding processes to be conducted through PhilJEPs, and it establishes strict guidelines to prevent fraud and corruption in government purchases. Next is the budget reform and transparency. It is a DBM initiative. It mandates strengthens financial accountability in government spending. Here are the key reforms. Number one is the cash-based budgeting system. It ensures timely disbursement and efficient fund utilization. Another one is the full disclosure policy or the FDP. It requires LGUs to publish financial transactions and budgets online. The last key administrative reform is the national government right-sizing program. It mandates aims to streamline the bureaucracy by reducing redundant government agencies and improving efficiency. What are the expected outcomes of this? Is number one, elimination of overlapping functions in government offices and cost reduction in administrative expenses. Next slide, please. So let's go now for the digital governance and e-government initiatives. So Integrated Government Philippines or IGOPHIL, it mandates digital transformation of government services. Here are the key components. Number one is Government Cloud or the GovCloud. It's centralized online services for agencies. Another one is the e-services portals. It is a digital platforms for transaction like eBIR, ePhilHealth, and GSIS Online. Next is the National ID System or the PhilSys Act RA 11055. It establishes a unified identification system to simply government transactions. What are the benefit of this is reduces the red tape and identity fraud and enhances efficiency in public service delivery. So next slide, please. What are the challenges in administrative reforms? Number one is the resistance to change. So some government agencies resist reforms due to vested interest. Another one is low implementation. It is a bureaucratic inefficiencies delay policy execution. And another challenge is the cybersecurity risk. It increased digital governance requires to stronger data protection. Here are the recommendations for strengthening administrative reforms. Number one is strengthen anti-corruption mechanism. It enforces stricter penalties for non-compliance with transparency measures. Another one is improve public-private collaboration. So it engaged private sector expertise in streamlining processes. And another one is enhance digital infrastructure. So invest in cybersecurity and IT capacity building for government agencies. So next slide, please. For our case study, so the Quezon City e-service digital transformation in Quezon City. So Quezon City is the largest city in Metro Manila, Philippines, has embraced digital transformation to enhance governance and public service delivery. One of these flagship initiates in the Quezon City e-services portal designed to provide residents and seamless access to government services online. With a population of over 3 million, Quezon City faces challenges in delivering efficiency public services. So the traditional bureaucratic processes often resulted in long queues, slow transactions, and limited transparency. To address this inefficiency, the city government launched the QCE service portal, aligning with global trends in e-governance and digital public administration. Next slide, please. So, QCE services, key features and implementation. So, number one is the online transaction. It is a digital application and renewal of business permits and licenses, online payment system for taxes, real estate dues, and other government fees, electronic processes of civil registry documents. Number one of that example is birth certificate, marriage certificate, and death certificate. The second QC services is the AI-powered assistance, deployment of a chat bot for real-time customer support and guidance. It is a automated responses to frequently asked questions, reducing the need for in-person inquiries. The third feature is the citizen feed mechanism. Online submission of service reviews to access user satisfaction. Open Data Dashboard is displaying real-time government transactions and processing times. And the last key feature and implementation is the data security and compliance. Implementation of encryption and cyber security measures to protect user data. And the compliance with the Data Privacy Act to ensure confidentiality of personal information. Next slide, please. So let's go for the challenges faced. Number one is ensuring data security and preventing cyber threats. Another challenge is the addressing digital literacy barriers, particularly for older residents. Another challenge is overcoming initial resistance for government employees and adopting the digital processes. So for the discussion, what are the factors have contributed to the success of QCE services in digital governance? Another question is, how can other cities in the Philippines adopt similar e-governance strategies? The last one is, what potential risks should local governments consider when expanding digital public services? So let's go first for what are the factors contributed to the success of QC e-services digital governance is the strong political will and leadership. The Quezon City government has prioritized digital transformation, ensuring sustained investment in technology and public service improvements. Next is the user-centric design. The platform was developed with accessibility in mind, making it easier for residents to navigate and complete transaction online. Next is the public-private partnerships. Collaboration with public tech firms has allowed for efficient system development and maintenance. Next factor is security and compliance. So adherence to data privacy law has built trust among users. So next is continuous improvement. So regular updates and integration of user feedback have enhanced system efficiency and usability. So let's go to the question of how can other cities in the Philippines adopt similar e-governance strategies? So start with high demand services. So identify and digitize the most frequent use government services. Example of this is the business permit and the tax payments. Next is the invest in digital infrastructure. So ensure stable internet connectivity and secure cloud-based storage solutions. And train government employees and citizens, conduct a workshop to improve digital literacy among employees and the public. Next of that is implement pilot programs. So test digital platforms in selected areas before full-scale implementation. Next is ensure interoperability or allow different government agencies to share and exchange data seamlessly. So now let's go for the question of what potential risks should local governments consider when expanding digital public services? So number one is the cybersecurity threats. So hacking, data breaches, and identity theft must be addressed with strong encryption and regular security audits. Next one is digital divide. Not all residents have access to the internet or digital devices, requiring alternative service option. Next is resistance to change. Some government employees and citizens may be hesitant to shift to digital platforms, necessitating awareness campaigns. Next is system downtime and technical glitches. So reliable IT support and backup systems are essential to prevent service disruption. And last one is sustainability and funding. Maintaining digital platforms requires ongoing financial and technical support to keep services operational and up to date. So that's all for our lecture. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. Can mute. Okay. Okay. So again, governance is about how government decisions are made and implemented. It involves transparency, accountability, and the participation of citizens. Administrative reforms, on the other hand, refer to the changes in government structures, systems, or processes to make them work better. No? Simply put, these reforms aims to make government services better, faster, more honest, and more efficient for the people. Let's say, for example, when the Philippine government introduced the Anti-Red Tape Act, no, it was an effort to cut unnecessary delays in getting permits and licenses. One key reform is simplifying government transaction. In the past, no, getting a business permit could take weeks. No, now with the ease of doing business law, processes must be completed within a few days. Online portal like business.gov.ph allow entrepreneurs not to register their business without visiting multiple offices. Globally, no, Singapore is a great model. No, business can be registered in just a few hours. No, thanks to their fully digital system. Decentralization is a common reform. No, this means giving more power to local government rather than concentrating everything in the national government. In the Philippines, this is seen in the Local Government Code 1991, sorry, which allows provinces, cities, and municipalities to manage their own budgets and projects. No? A local mayor can now build roads or create health programs without waiting for national approval. So a global example is India, no, where village council manage local development funds directly. Reforms are also focused on reducing corruption by making government, of course, or for making government processes transparent. For instance, the Philippine government electronic procurement system or yung PhilJEPS no, ensures public bidding is done fairly and online so the public can see who's winning contracts. No? Globally, Wanda implemented similar online system, making it one of the less corrupt countries in Africa. When people see how money is spent, there's less room for abuse. No? So, modern reforms include performance-based governance where public officials and agencies are rewarded based on results. In our country, programs like Seal of Good Local Governance recognize LGUs that deliver quality services. Meanwhile, in countries like United States, data and key performance indicators are used to measure the effectiveness of government programs. If a health center in a U.S. town fails to meet standards, it can be restructured, improved, or improved quickly based on those measurements. Okay, thank you so much.